Morning. I want to begin by saying that the 5 o'clock meeting today has been postponed. That's official. I think, is the lunch still on? All right. Well, it's been a great sermon. I want to first welcome all the visitors. If you're visiting today, you're honored guests. And if we have not come to say hello to you, please tell us, and we will do that as soon as the service is over. Okay. Also, it's great to be here. My goal is to meet with every single person in here for lunch or dinner or just a cup of coffee, or even just I can come over for a few minutes and get to know you a little more. 95% is not good enough for me. I want it to be 100. So expect phone calls, expect emails, maybe even text if I feel like it this week. So far, I've had the opportunity to meet with Mary Lou and Tony. So that's 2. We're getting there. But it is great to be here. I want to start with, I know we talked about the fruit of the Spirit, and that's going to be our first series. Not today, though. Kind of took an audible. And I'm going to go with Nehemiah, and you'll see why in a moment. I need to start with a story about, there was a company who was struggling a little bit, and they wanted to hire a CEO who was tough, because their employees have kind of, they'd started slacking off. So they hired this man who was notoriously a very, very tough guy. So he was going to come in and lay down the law. So the first day he was there, he's touring the building, and he goes into one of the rooms, and there's a lot of people in there. One of which is just kind of sitting against the wall, looking at his cell phone, reading a magazine, completely disinterested. So this new CEO says, you know what? This is my time. I'm going to make an example out of this guy in front of everybody, and then we'll know who's boss. So he goes up to him and says, son, how much money do you make in a week? The guy says, $400. $400. So he takes out his checkbook, writes him a $400 check, gives it to him and says, here, take this money and get out of here. You're fired. Felt pretty good about himself. Look at me, I just exerted my authority. So then in a voice that everybody could hear, he yells out, could someone tell me what this slacker used to do around here? Guy raises his hand and says, sir, that's the pizza delivery guy. It's safe to say that CEO did not assess the situation properly. He shot first and asked questions later. Today, I'm going to show you an example of someone who did the opposite. A former cupbearer by the name of Nehemiah. So today, I'm going to kind of be going a little back and forth, so I hope you don't mind. Quick historical background of Israel. As you probably know, Israel, 2 kingdoms, right? It was divided. Israel was in the north. It was taken captive in 722 BC by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom of Judah, which we're going to focus on today, they were taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians in 586 BC. Long story short, about 40 years later, the Babylonian Empire fell, and people were allowed to go back. The exiles were slowly but surely allowed back to their homeland of Jerusalem. The temple was completed once again because the first temple that Solomon helped build was completely destroyed. So the second one was built. It was a little shabby. It was more symbolic in nature. It definitely did not reach the splendor of the original one. So then in 457 BC, Ezra, who, by the way, Ezra is a wonderful book, which is basically the part 1 of Nehemiah's part 2. So I suggest you read that when you have some time. He was authorized to take yet another group back home to Jerusalem. And this is where Nehemiah is going to enter the picture. Because although the temple was built, the walls just weren't up to par. They were ruined. And we could take this information to mean a few things. First of all, walls do separate. Walls separated. I mean figuratively. We talked this morning about Genesis 3, the fall of man. Adam and Eve, their action, their foolish action, separated us from God. Fortunately, this is not a God who gives up. And it's not that he said, okay, you guys messed up, I'm out of here. No. God continued to reveal himself through the law, through judges, through kings, through prophets, and on it goes. So today, we have Nehemiah, who's really reaping the benefits of God fulfilling his upper story. And what I mean by that is, again, yes, God can give us tough love. And he didn't issue consequences to be a mean God, to prove his authority. No, he did it to further along his story. And part of that story includes Jerusalem being restored. When we think about leaders in the Bible, King David, Moses, certainly Jesus, Jacob, Joseph, and so on, you ever think about Nehemiah? It's not as well known, but it's don't blink and miss the importance of this man. Nehemiah, actually a name meaning comforter, kind of like Noah, actually. Now, Nehemiah was an exiled Jew who was part of the Babylonian captivity. He ended up being governor, so kind of like Joseph, he was in the wrong place, but at least he had friends in high places. He had some connections. But first, he was what we call a cupbearer for his earthly king, a man by the name of Artaxerxes. So he was the cupbearer, but he served more in an advisory role than he did that of a servant. So what we want to do, if you can go to Nehemiah. Nehemiah is right between Ezra and Esther in the Old Testament, of course. So he started, we've got a city without walls. Nehemiah heard from his brother and some other men exactly the situation that was going on in Jerusalem. So to back up, people were allowed back to Jerusalem, but it was not ideal. So I'm just going to start with Nehemiah 1, verses 3 and 4. I'm using the NIV today. They said to me, those who survived the exile are back in the province, are in great trouble and disgrace. Remember that word. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Okay. Situation is not ideal. A city without walls is a city that's begging to be destroyed again. Now you're a sitting duck. Might as well have a target on your back. And look at some of these words here. And what he did next was he informed King Artaxerxes about his desire to go back to his hometown. Now we've all worked for people who maybe scared us a little bit. Have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to ask your boss or your supervisor for a day off or for some time off, and you're kind of biting your nails and you're playing in your head, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And you're scared to death. This is even worse. If you recall, if you remember the 1st and 2nd Kings, a lot of these kings, let's just say they were, mentally unstable. Now, Nehemiah knew full well that asking Artaxerxes, the king, for this leave of absence, if you will, the king could have, A, let him go, B, not let him go and doubled his workload, or C, right, off with his head. Fortunately, God intervened. Artaxerxes let him go, chose letter A, because Nehemiah was a godly man who trusted God, and he also trusted godly men. So he's about to enter Jerusalem. Before we look at today's scripture, which is chapter 2, verses 11 through 20, I want to set it up by reading 2:10. And it says, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. So this was good news for Nehemiah. It was great news for Israel that or for Judah, I should say, that Jerusalem was being rebuilt. But it was bad news for the neighbors. Why? This threatened their political power and their authority and their riches, and they were not happy with this. So, let's go to the next slide. Hopefully you can see this. Now, Nehemiah's task was to rebuild the walls brick by brick. Now, of course, you can only do this one brick at a time. What's great about this is the temple, obviously it was spiritual in nature. It's symbolic. But the secular part of it was the actual walls that were falling apart. So the point here is God used, and he still uses, both the sacred and the secular to fulfill his plan to restore Israel. There's always a plan. So he's about to inspect the walls, as Nehemiah. Let's go ahead and start out by reading verses 11 and 12. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me, except the one I was riding on. Okay, let's stop there. So he was sent on a journey to Jerusalem. And wow, what a journey this must have been. We don't know really what happened in the interim. When we talk about journeys, this is not the same thing as traveling from New Lenox to Joliet. This probably took about 2 months. What was going through his mind? Like, wow, I wonder what Jerusalem's going to be like. What is it going to look like? It's not like his friends could show him pictures or text him images. And this is the real deal here. He didn't immediately, by the way, if you could see, he did not immediately go in and start taking care of business. He waited 3 days. 3 days. I don't know about you, that would be really hard for me to do. But he was composed. He was discreet. He was a leader. He was disciplined. He was cautious. He led by example now, and we'll see in a little bit. He will also lead by example later. Let's take a look at the next couple verses, 13 through 15. By night, I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which have been broken down, and its gates, which have been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the fountain gates and the king's pool. But there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. So he firmly assessed the situation. Unlike the guy I talked about in the illustration at the beginning, he gathered all the information. He gathered all the facts, and then he went in. How many times do we watch the news or read a news story and it's all wrong? It's completely inaccurate, but hey, this is breaking news and we've got to be the first ones with the story. Never mind the fact that every single thing you reported is incorrect, but hey, at least you were first with the story. Accuracy should never, ever be sacrificed for speed. So what did it look like? It's a bit of a map of, well, present-day Jerusalem, but the gates remain the same. As you can see, we just talked about Nehemiah, and let's see, the Dung Gate, the Valley Gate, the Fountain Gates. This is what's in the text. So Nehemiah was inspecting mostly the southern area. But usually Jerusalem was attacked from the north, because, as you might be able to tell, it was most vulnerable there. So let's get inside Nehemiah's head for a minute. He's got to be exhausted. He's got to wonder, I left, well, even though I was in exile, I left a cushy exile, if you will, for this. I mean, I knew people. I was the governor. People liked me there. I was comfortable. He actually lived in a place called Susa, S-U-S-A, which was one of the most beautiful and prominent of the whole Persian Empire. Do I really need this? Well, and sometimes God calls us to do something, and sometimes we think, you know what? Hold on, God. I'm going to do it when I'm ready. The time just isn't right now. Oh, really? God said, remember Jonah? The time's not right, huh? Let me tell you something. We don't get to decide when the time is right. God does. But what was Nehemiah thinking? I wonder have you ever been to either your old neighborhood or maybe a place you used to go, or perhaps you graduated college a few, or maybe 20, 30 years ago, and you go back and it looks nothing like it did before. That's normal. And sometimes society makes it that way, or sometimes the culture goes in certain trends, but other times, Mother Nature is the reason. Let me show you a couple examples. Hopefully you can see that. This picture was taken August 31st, 2005, in, I think it was called Long Beach, Mississippi. For all you history buffs out there, what happened 2 days prior to this? What was that?
Katrina?
Exactly. Hurricane Katrina. So this was not in Louisiana. This was in Mississippi. Obviously, they got hit hard, too. Now, it's hard to see in this picture because we can't see her face. I guarantee she's walking around her neighborhood saying, because she's got her phone, what in the world am I doing? It's unrecognizable. And for Nehemiah, he's going back to Jerusalem at night. And oh, by the way, it's not like they were using flashlights. It's not like he had floodlights to help guide him the way. So he must have been very disoriented. We take these things for granted. Imagine your neighborhood as you left this morning. Chances are you didn't just look around and say, wow, what a great neighborhood I live in. You probably just got in the car, told the kids to hurry up, and you came to church. Nothing wrong with that. Now imagine you go back home after church today, and it looks like that. And we're getting a little snow, but can you imagine? If you've been through something like that, and I don't know if anyone here has, then and only then can you really start to understand. This was in Moore, Oklahoma, May 20th, 2013. Remember this tornado? I think 24 people died, 377 serious injuries, $2 billion worth of damage. It's unthinkable. And obviously the aftermath was very intense. I just want to read you a little bit from an article that I read the day after this awful hurricane. And this is in Moore, Oklahoma. It said, sun was hard to come by in Moore, Oklahoma on Tuesday. The sky still looked menacing, dark and foggy. Mist turned to rain. Lightning struck from the air. This suburb outside Oklahoma City looked like flattened cardboard. On the ground, homes were messes of splinters. Cars thrown like toys sat in ridiculous places. Hunks of steel hung in trees, the trees that were left. Most were shaved down to gnarly apocalyptic wishbones. When people were allowed back on their street, if emergency crews allowed them, that's when the real trauma set in for many. It's bizarre and disorienting when every landmark and sign your eye knows is suddenly gone, and there's miles of nothing in its place. One of the guys who lived there said, it's funny when you can't tell your own stuff when you get back, and it looks like this. Moore has no power. Water is out, and volunteers are handing out bottles. The twister is gone, but the danger is still real. Well, that's amazing. I can't imagine. But like anyone who's been through something like this, you do have to pick up the pieces. You do have to move forward. And you can only do it one step at a time. Nehemiah had to go through this as well with Jerusalem. But whenever you rebuild something, whether it's literally like that, or more figuratively, say, you've been through some emotional trauma, there's good news and there's bad news. Whenever you move forward, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is you leave a lot of your stuff behind. You know what the good news is? You leave a lot of your stuff behind. You have an opportunity. It's not always easy. I mean, change, nobody really enjoys change. But wow, look at it as an incredible opportunity that we have here, not only as a congregation, but as individuals, as a community, to restart something. It's an incredible opportunity. And I see the people in Jerusalem as those who are probably getting a little complacent, saying, you know what, we're used to this mess. It's a mess, but at least it's our mess, right? It's like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. But, it's still the devil. But what Nehemiah wanted to do was move forward and actually improve the situation. So let's go to verses 16 through